Watching TV has changed over time. Streaming has become the new norm. That's why Golden State Media Concepts television podcast dives headfirst to the world of cord cutting. Want to be on the loop of what's hot in Netflix? Or if it's not a preference, what about original shows in Hulu? We've got you covered. Join us as we fill in the blank and talk about movies to stream and what show you should be binging. This is the Golden State Media Concepts television podcast.
Thanks for tuning in to the GSMC television podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Hi guys, I'm your new host, Devan Harris, and I'm so happy to be casting with you for the first time today. I just want to wish all of our viewers a very safe and happy holiday, but buckle up, because the gift's not done giving yet. So today we'll be talking a little bit about Cats, the movie musical that I'm sure everybody has on their minds. We'll be talking about Greta Gerwig's Little Women that just opened this past weekend at the box office. We'll be talking about You, Season 2 on Netflix, and a little bit about The Witcher and Don't F with Cats, Hunting an Internet Killer. So, get snug, get cozy, grab yourself a snack, and let's jump right in. So if you're not familiar with Cats, here's a little bit of a background on what's been going on. So on the 20th of December 2019, Warner Brothers released Cats, a movie musical adaptation for theaters. Now this was based on the same musical on Broadway, written by Andrew Lloyd Webber, that premiered in the 1990s. All of these cats gather together on the same night every year, and they go to what is called the Jellicle Ball. They are called the Jellicle Cats, and they have to decide together which one will ascend to the Heaviside Layer and be reborn into a new life. Is it absurd? Yes. Is it out there? Yes. But that's showbiz, baby, and I think that's exactly why it would have been better left on the stage instead of the screen, because this movie was marketed, I'm assuming, to adults, because it has some pretty heavy themes. But that's the thing, is adults are not going to watch a bunch of half human, half cats unless they go to the theater to watch people in makeup perform a ballet, which is essentially what Cats is. I feel like the film industry is finally catching on to how big the demographic of musical theater lovers and musical lovers is, and they're trying to tap into this market of creating musicals into movie musicals. And whereas In the Heights, which is coming out later 2020, will probably fly at the box office, as would a Hamilton remake, would be amazing, Cats is not amazing because of that difference in material. The Broadway musical of Cats is essentially 2 hours of singing, nonstop singing, ballet, and incredible makeup and costume. There's not much for it to lend itself when you translate that to a screen film. I feel as if Warner Brothers relied on the huge cast to draw people in, using Taylor Swift and Judi Dench and Jason Derulo, Jennifer Hudson, all of these big stars to kind of get people's interest. But the thing is, you don't really need to sell a good musical. If it's good, it will sell on its own. If it's good material, people will want to see it. And I think that's where this movie flopped. There wasn't a lot for there to be seen on the screen that translated well from Broadway. Not only that, but it was kind of creepy. I remember whenever I saw the trailer way back in July, I thought, what the hell am I watching? It was seeing Judi Dench turn around as a cat wearing a fur coat. That's frightening. That is frightening. And if you don't believe me, go Google Judi Dench and cats and try and sleep well. It's kind of unsettling, and Warner Brothers even released a patch on the day of Christmas, 5 days after its premiere in theaters, to fix some of that CGI. So they rushed because the outpouring of criticism that, dude, this movie's creepy, it's weird. Initially, it looked like some of the shots were unfinished. So Judi Dench, you can very clearly see in the first version of the unpatched film that hit theaters, she is a full cat, but she has a normal human hand and a wedding ring on her left hand. And so Warner Brothers sent out this patch to fix that kind of thing. So I don't think it was just the material. I think it was also a very rushed process. The whole process for making the movie was less than a year when lead photography started to the release date in theaters, and that's just not enough time. You have Finding Nemo and Finding Dory and all of these Pixar movies, which are fully animated, which take 6 to 7 years, production and post-production. And then you have Cats, which filmed and released in less than a year, and that's just not enough time for all of this craziness. So I sat and I watched the movie because I grew up doing musical theater for 10 years of my life, from the time I was 11 until the time I was 21. So I had to, put my money where my mouth is. And I have to say, I'm not a fan. I wasn't a fan of the original musical until seeing the movie musical. I couldn't quite appreciate it in its original form until I saw how absurd it was commercialized. And it kind of took me back to the theater and the costumes, the makeup, and the dancing and the singing. But it also reinforced my thought that the film lost that magic. Cats, I would much rather see a bunch of actual humans dressed up as cats in awesome hair and makeup rather than a half-human, half-CGI cat with dancing rocket cockroaches and half-human, half-CGI mice-human hybrids. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's an experience. Some people are saying it'll be the next Rocky Horror. It'll be the movie that people watch in irony. And I have to admit, I love movies that I can laugh at, that take me on a journey, but Warner Brothers just didn't really hit it out of the park with this one. I think the budget was $95 million, and in the first weekend of opening, it brought in $6.5 million, which is a flop. All in all, I think, even though the movie was absurd, I think you have to respect the drip, because Cats, to a 7-year-old or 8-year-old watching the movie in the theaters, although absurd, might be what Annie was to me, or what Hamilton is to billions, not billions, to many kids. I remember seeing Annie in theaters, and it just thrilling me half to death, and I remember saying, I want to do that, I want to dance, I want to sing, and who knows, Cats might be that to a couple hundred kids. And isn't that what art is? You ultimately kind of have to respect art for what it is and for the joy that it brings to people. And if Cats brought joy to people, that's really all you can ask for. I think it's a little bit weird that Taylor Swift didn't really promote any of the Cats material on her Twitter, Instagram, or anything. I read an interview where she said, I just didn't think it would appeal to people. I think she just really didn't. Yeah. I think sis knew something we didn't know. So that's Cats. And I mean, love it, hate it, respect it for what it is. Runtime, 110 minutes, in a theater near you. Do what you will. Next up, we have Greta Gerwig's Little Women. I'm telling you, I expected greatness, but I didn't expect it to be this great. I did not expect to cry maybe 2, 3, 4 times throughout the whole movie. How many times can you adapt a movie and film a remake and win the hearts of millions? But that's what this film did. More when we come back.
Want to know the latest and hottest music hitting the airwaves? Don't be left out. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Music Podcast. Keith keeps you on the loop with everything you need to know from pop, rock, hip-hop, and the top 40. And we'll throw in news of your favorite artists, concert and tour dates, and so much more. Listen no further, because this is the gold standard in music podcast.
We've got to talk about this. We've got to talk about this. I have to stand up for this one because this movie was incredible. Greta Gerwig released the adaptation of Louisa May Alcott's book, Little Women, with Sony Media Pictures on December 25th, 2019, Christmas. Whew! This movie was good. This movie was so good. I'd never seen any of Greta Gerwig's work. I know that she directed and wrote Lady Bird, which Saoirse Ronan starred in, and Saoirse plays Jo March in Little Women. When I'm telling you, these women can act, I'm not playing. I have chills as I'm talking because the movie, I don't cry at movies. I have a very hard time connecting with film in the way that I get so emotional, and this movie totally blew that out of the water for me, and I was embarrassed because I sat with my mouth open so many times in this movie. We have Saoirse Ronan, Emma Watson, who plays Meg, Florence Pugh, Timothy Chalamet. Florence Pugh, I'm telling you, she plays Amy. I saw her in Midsummer, and I immediately was captivated by her. And these girls are gorgeous. Every single one of these actresses are just beautiful, and they look so different. Emma Watson is this thin, dainty. She plays Meg, who is the sort of more domestic one, and she's gentle and precious. And I get serious Beauty and the Beast vibes from every role she plays. It's such a contrast from Hermione, but she absolutely just melted my heart. And you have Saoirse, who is strong and has these piercing eyes and piercing features, and she's running through the streets and getting her, whenever she's doing the scene when Jo's getting her book published, and she's finally got it published, and she's running back through the streets. It's like, this movie honestly made me remember why I got into media and entertainment. I wanted to be a part of media that moves people, and this movie moved me to keep following my dreams in a way that I hadn't felt in a while. So Little Women is basically about four sisters who are navigating the ups and downs of their life, and Jo March is the central character in this book, which was adapted into a film. And Jo wants to be a writer. She's young, she's a firecracker, she's the most boyish of her sisters. She doesn't have time for acting like a lady. And so the whole film is based around her. Her sisters have equal airtime too, but it's Jo's story, because in the end it's Jo is writing the story. And Jo takes us through her life trying to become a published author. And it really is kind of a very old, the first feminist piece. So Jo takes us on her journey from the time her and her sisters are young to the time where she goes off and she goes to New York. And the movie chronicles that very well. I don't know how many times this can be made into other adaptations. It was made from the book to a movie, to a musical, back to a movie, to a present day movie, into this movie. It just didn't disappoint. From the very beginning, just seeing this trailer in the theaters, it was such a contrast to me in my memory from seeing Cats. I remember seeing this trailer in theaters maybe a month ago. The show didn't have a lot of advertising, which speaks a lot with how well it's done so far in 4 days. And I looked over at my partner and I was like, I have to see this movie. Something about the cinematography and, of course, Greta Gerwig's direction. It's a female-directed film. It just hits you, like, it hits you in your feels. I don't want to sound cliche or anything, but I left the theater proud to be a woman, and that's something that is few and far in between for me. Oftentimes, I mimic Joe in my thoughts of, man, I wish I was born a boy because things are easier for men, and I know that is changing, but this movie honestly left me with such a hunger to keep going after my dreams and just pushing through, not giving up. One of my favorite lines, Saoirse as Joe says in the movie, and it's one of the key lines from Little Women. However, it's not actually from Little Women. Louisa May Alcott did not write this in her book, but Joe says, women, they have minds and they have souls as well as just hearts, and they've got ambition and they've got talent as well as beauty, and I'm so sick of people saying that love is just all a woman is fit for. I'm so sick of it. And I want to say I was in tears whenever she was saying that, because women in this day and age, we want to be in the workforce, but we also want to be mothers, and I feel like we're being measured by this impossible standard sometimes to be both, yet we don't want to be trivialized and we don't want to live in an antiquated society. And this movie is like an homage to the fact that women can be everything. I was watching this movie and my boyfriend leaned over and he said, "Which one are you?" And I said, I think I'm Joe. And then I would watch another scene and I'd think, no, I'm Amy. And then Meg would come on and I'd be like, no, I'm Meg because I want a family. And it just, that's the genius of this writing, is that Greta Gerwig in the screenplay, she made all of the characters so accessible and so relatable. I didn't expect the theater to be as packed as it was because, like I said, there wasn't a lot of advertisement for this movie. And so when we got in and it was packed and I was actually rubbing elbows with someone next to me, I was super, I was enthralled. I loved packed theaters, but I was super surprised because I hadn't heard a lot of buzz about it. But it almost is like it speaks for itself. A standout moment for me was the difference in Little Women, in Gerwig's version of Little Women. She altered the ending where Joe and the publisher from the Volcanic Press, they talk straight to the audience. And rather than being submissive in getting the copyrights for her book, Joe demands a better financial deal. She buys the copyright. She bargains with him for getting more payment, more royalties. And at the end, the publisher is telling her, okay, if you're going to have all of these rights and you're going to have the copyright to your book, at least end it the way everybody wants it to end. And he said, you need to end it by getting married. And so Joe, in the movie, there's a whole bunch of cutscenes. It's this really interactive kind of niche little way to end a movie. Real time, as they're talking about how her book is going to end, the movie is jumping back and forth to how it actually ends and how the movie actually ends. And it ends up being a romantic ending because the publisher says girls want romance, but it also keeps her integrity, and she doesn't get proposed to at the end. She doesn't end married like the other ladies end married. It keeps that sort of integrity about Joe as a character. And even though she did bargain and she did get her way, she also gets, a little bit soft. We see the softer side of Joe, and everybody's happy in the end. And it's a triumph, I think, for women to see that you can have it all. You can be great and you can be brave, but you can also be soft, and the world is not going to victimize you for it. I loved the movie, and it's getting insane reviews for a movie I didn't think anybody knew anything about. its ratings are astronomical. When we come back, we will be talking about You, Season 2, the Netflix premiere. Are serial killers a thing now? Like, serial killers, are they hot now? Like, everybody's kind of on this Ted Bundy craze. I don't know. It's not me. I mean, we got to remember, they're still serial killers. So we're going to be diving into You, Season 2 premiere when we come back.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Yo. Okay. We're back. And we're talking about the pivotal Netflix series, You. So, You premiered in 2018, and it's centered around this character, Joe, played by Penn Badgley, and he was, average run-of-the-mill guy. He works in a cafe, he loves books, but he's a creepy stalker serial killer. So some of you might remember Penn Badgley as Dan from Gossip Girl, the show that dominated the CW in the early 2000s. His character from Gossip Girl is night and day from Joe. I watched the first season, I was sucked in, but I actually didn't follow the masses when they said, maybe I think a serial killer's hot. Maybe I think a stalker's, maybe he's so hot. No. Come on. I cringe whenever I see a man being creepy on TV. I hate creepy men. But I did get sucked into the first season. And I watched it till the end. I fell in love with Beck, not so much Joe. It's a very dark series. It deals with, there's drug abuse, there's sex and sexual violence, of course, gore and murder. It's a pretty wild ride. So I won't spoil anything for anybody who hasn't seen the first series, and I'll be pretty brief in my overview. But we left off season 1, Joe and Beck having a face-off. It's kind of hard to be vague here. Look, Beck wasn't perfect. She was manipulative. She was insecure, but I liked Beck. I saw a lot of myself in Beck. Not the manipulative part, but the insecure part and wanting to just fit in. And Beck was smart. For those of you who don't know, Beck was the season 1 ingenue, and I really recommend going and watching season 1 before you watch season 2. Joe fell in love with Beck. Well, fell in love. Joe stalked Beck and got her to fall in love with him through his cunning and manipulative use of social media, manipulating her friends and her surroundings, and basically learning the ins and outs about her life until he could insert himself in perfectly. And the show is really creepy, and that way it shows you the inside of the mind of somebody who is like very sociopathic and manipulative. And it scared me a little bit because if you look around, I think the odds are 1 in 10 people is a psychopath that you know. And so you kind of look around and you're like, is it you? Oh, is it you? Is it me? And so Joe sets his sights on Beck, and eventually through the series, we kind of go on a ride of Joe trying to insert himself into Beck's life, and eventually he is successful, and they start this courtship, you can say. And I won't give away any endings, but Beck, things don't exactly work out. And we're left with a mysterious driver of Joe's character and the reason he is the way he is coming back. And he moves from New York to California in search of a fresh start. So we start off and we're in New York, and Joe has changed his name to Will. Will Bettelheim is what he has coined himself, and obviously we know that that's not his real name, and it is made even more apparent at the end of this episode. I strongly suggest watching the first season, so you can learn a little bit more about Joe. In the second season, first episode, we are introduced into a whole new world with a plethora of new characters. So, of course, there's Joe/Will. So he's moved to New York, and he's working in another cafe. We're introduced to Love. Her name is Love. You know, I wouldn't, but some parents are brave. We're introduced, so that's his love interest. Her name is Love. Funny enough. We're introduced to Ellie, his neighbor, 40, Quinn, another name, Love's brother, and Candace. Not gonna ruin that too much, but she's, ghost of girlfriends past. And Delilah, Joe's landlord and Ellie's older sister. So this show, I see a lot of pattern that I saw a lot in the first season. For example, Ellie, a young girl, Joe's landlord's sister, kind of mirrors Paco a little bit. In the first season, Paco was Joe's, not protege, but he was the youngest cast member of the series, and Joe kind of watched out for him. And what's weird is that although Joe is this homicidal creep, his inner dialogue is sweet, and that's what gets me about this. The show is almost manipulating you into feeling sorry for this crazy monster. His inner monologue says, don't worry about him, he's not your issue, and ultimately Joe folds, and he does the same thing with Ellie. He kind of watches out for her, and we learn in the first episode that he's going to use her in the same way as he used Paco, as a sort of way to feel better about the things he does. Without spoiling too much, I will say that Elizabeth Lail, who plays Guinevere Beck, does make a guest appearance in the second season. Is she alive or dead? I'm not going to go into that, but you'll just have to watch the series for yourself. Fans all over the world are excited that You is back. I'm excited. All 10 episodes are available on Netflix. And another surprising face, John Stamos, plays as Joe's ex-therapist. He comes back for season 2. He was in season 1. So if that's not enough initiative or motive to watch the first season through, I really can't help you out. So when we come back, we will be talking about Don't F with Cats, hunting an internet serial killer. I'd heard about this show for a while. I've seen it on my timeline and my feed. Everyone around me has been watching it, and I decided to check it out for myself. Do I regret it? It wasn't easy for me to watch. So we'll be diving into that and more when we come back.
Want to find out what movies to go see? Then check out the GSMC Movie Podcast. It's your ticket to the latest movies, whether it's a new blockbuster event, romantic, comedy, or action flick. This show has got it all covered. They talk some what to go see now, don't bother, what's hot on Netflix, and everything in between. That's GSMCpodcast.com/movie-podcast. When it's all about the movies, it has to be this new show. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Don't F with cats. I need to get a little rubber ducky so I can squeeze it when I say a bad word. Don't F with cats. Okay, I thought the title was an indie metaphor that had nothing to do with the TV show. Like, I thought that Don't F with Cats was the same as, you know, those old Fall Out Boy, Panic at the Disco albums, super long album names that didn't have really anything to do with the songs. So that's what I thought that this was. I went in not knowing what I was getting myself into. Well, spoiler, I was wrong. It does have things to do with cats. So, lights up, show starts. There is a woman in a confessional style setting talking about YouTube and a video that she saw on YouTube. And I audibly gasped when I saw that the video was titled One Man, Two Kittens. Now, I don't know if my mind just goes to another place, but it wasn't the most forgiving title. As soon as I saw the kittens, I knew, man, this is about to be messed up. So the video, the show zooms us in on a screen, and I guess they had found video, or maybe it's a reenactment, but there's a video of a man with two kittens on his bed. He is in a hood, never a good sign. Anybody who obscures their face in a video, they're either very smart or very bad. We don't see him for a while. We see the kittens crawling around, meowing, being cute, and I just feel this dread in the bottom of my stomach. My heart's pounding. I'm like, what am I about to see? So I thought, okay, well, this is a documentary, and animal cruelty is not very popular, so they'll be brief, right? No. So this lady, her name is Body Move On. All the while she is explaining what she is seeing on screen, we are seeing the same thing. We see the kittens. We see the man. He is holding a plastic bag, and off screen we have subtitles, and we can hear, you know, and see via subtitles, kittens meowing, plastic bag, wrestling, vacuum, and that was enough for me to cover my ears, cover my eyes, and not, you know, I kind of just checked out. I can't do things like that. I can't do animal cruelty. I get a pit in my stomach, and I get nauseous when I see uncensored brutality against people or animals. I can't do it, and it's something that would have stayed with me. The visual and the sound would have stayed with me for, I don't know how long. It's something I think about. It's like it replays in my mind when I see something bad, and it hurts. And so I closed my eyes, I put my hands over my ears, and I waited for it to pass. I talked to some people after, because although I did not know exactly what happened, I don't know. I mean, I can guess from what I was seeing, but I did talk to some people and they confirmed, yes, it is what I thought, and it was brutal. Of course, they didn't show this. Netflix didn't show this because this is a documentary style show. They didn't show exactly what happened, but they gave just enough hint in audio that you can put two and two together. Can I just make a statement on what kind of person, what happened to you for you to put two small baby creatures into a plastic bag and vacuum seal the plastic bag? What kind of monster? As much as it turns my stomach and it is revolting for me to see and hear, Netflix did gold mine with this idea, because one thing that most people can agree on, most not depraved people, is seeing animals being abused or hurt, seeing defenseless creatures, babies, animals, baby animals, not being able to fend for themselves ignites a fire and an anger in people. And that's what the concept is. Basically, don't F with cats. The hunt for an internet serial killer is about one lady, Body Move On, who sees this video and essentially tracks this cat killer down. She uses her internet sleuthing skills. She tracks him on eBay, on YouTube. She goes down to all the different social medias and she finds him essentially over the internet. And the premise behind this is that whenever people come together for a common cause, the impossible can be done. Although I can say the internet killer is found. I won't say his name. I'm sure you could look it up. I don't want to give any spoilers away for anybody who hasn't seen the short documentary. He does go to trial. Although it is a happy ending, there was not a happy ending for the animals involved, and there isn't a happy ending for hundreds of animals every day that are misused and mistreated and abused and killed at the hands of monsters. While this show does unite many people, many animal lovers, on the basis of their love for animals, it is also a crime series because this perpetrator is a criminal. He is constantly throughout the documentary taunting the people that are trying to track him down. It blows up into this big criminal trial and criminal chase. The police are chasing him, and he actually comes face to face with the Samaritans that are trying to hunt him down in very scary ways. He is always seemingly one step ahead of the police and everyone around him. The series takes place over the course of 2 years, in which many people band together to try and track this man down. So who are these internet sleuths? And I think this premise of the fact that this woman, her real name is Deanna Thompson. She goes by the pseudonym Body Move On. It's a homophone of a Beastie Boys song. And she pairs with John Green, not the author, but another person on the internet who founded the internet group, Find the Kitten Vacuumer for Great Justice. I think the fact that this woman is a layman, she's not a police officer, she's not in the FBI, she just uses the skills that she knows from being in the internet age to find this man. I think it is a very interesting premise and something that we don't see often. It takes the Samaritans and puts them right in the face of action and shows us that if we have a passion to do good, there's no limits to what we can do, no matter our title, no matter the prestige we have. If you're interested, Don't F with Cats on Netflix. It's a 3-part series. If you like crime, it would probably be up your alley. It's not easy, not the easiest thing to watch, but it's definitely very captivating. So when we come back, we will be talking about The Witcher, the new series that was just released on Netflix, as well as the ties it has to the old video game, some similarities, some differences. And later in the segment, we will talk about what's coming to Disney Plus. So stay tuned. We have a couple more cool things coming your way. We'll be right back.
Golden State Media Concepts Sci-Fi Podcast. Together we dive into the world of sci-fi and science fiction. From episodes of Star Trek, Star Wars, to The Walking Dead, Resident Evil, all the hot new science fiction movies from the backdoors of Marvel or DC. The Golden State Media Concepts Sci-Fi Podcast. You'll never look at science fiction the same way again.
When I sat down to watch The Witcher, the new Netflix series, I went into it knowing that it would be a little bit of a struggle for me because sci-fi and fantasy is not my favorite genre. However, I decided to go into it with an open mind because there has to be a reason everybody rants and raves about The Mandalorian and The Witcher and Game of Thrones. So although it's not exactly my cup of tea, I decided to just give it my best shot. So, Henry Cavill, perhaps better known for playing Clark Kent / Superman in the DC universe, stars as Geralt of Rivia in The Witcher. So this guy's got quite a bit under his belt. He's been on The Tudors. He was Charles Brandon in The Tudors. He was in Man of Steel as Clark Kent, in Batman vs. Superman again as Clark Kent, in Justice League, Mission Impossible, and Night Hunter. He's kind of got the action fantasy genre down. The Witcher is based on a couple of books by Polish author Andrzej Sapkowski, and it has been made into comics, a TV show, a movie, and even a tabletop RPG game, all based on Sapkowski's work. The most famous adaptation, however, is the Witcher trilogy, and that is a video game trilogy by the Studio CD Projekt Red. Fun fact about the TV show, the performance by Henry Cavill, his voice, specifically his voice, which was inspired by the voice actor Doug Cockle, is taken straight from the video game. Cavill's acting choices make sense once you've seen the video game interpretation of the character. So, the video game and the show both take place on a continent called the Continent. So, if that wasn't confusing enough, the continent is called the Continent. And the continent is full of your standard fantasy people, elves, dwarves. However, you also have other worlds involved in the continent. So you have monsters and vampires and werewolves, and also there you can expect folkloric stuff like fairies and grumpkins. Most stuff drawn from Slavic myths. So as The Witcher starts, we see Henry Cavill playing Geralt, and he's fighting with a creature in the water. The creature bursts out from the water, grabbing him. He's holding Cavill with one of his tentacles, and Cavill slices his arm off, and we see his eyes are black. Eventually, we learn that this creature is called a Kikamora, and that the Witcher, Geralt, is a magical being. He is described as a white-haired, cat-eyed, spell-casting vagabond who carries 2 swords. The premiere doesn't quite come out and explain this, but Witchers are essentially monster hunters for hire. They are raised for the job from childhood and granted extraordinary supernatural powers that include super strength, night vision, and an extended lifespan. So basically, the Witcher in the first scene is fighting this Kikamora. He battles him, he wins, and he is off to collect his bounty. The trade-off for being a witcher is that everybody hates you, even though you are most of the time doing tasks as hired by the people who hate you because they cannot do them themselves. Much like The Mandalorian, The Witcher, in its first episode, is seen as having the central character being caught similarly into a moral compromise. If you like Game of Thrones, you will likely like this series because The End's Beginning was directed by the same DP who was on the first and last 2 episodes of the Game of Thrones first season. If you would like more information, go over to the GSMC Sci-Fi Podcast, as I'm sure they will be covering The Witcher in all of its entirety. Okay, Disney fans, Lizzie McGuire is officially confirmed for a reboot. Hilary Duff said in a recent interview that in 2020 Disney Plus would be airing the Lizzie McGuire reboot. We don't know much about the plot, we just know it picks up 15 years later. Lizzie's in her 20s, she has a good job and a bigger shoe budget. Where we left off was in the Lizzie McGuire movie. Basically, Lizzie and all her friends had flown to Rome on a class trip, and Lizzie became an overnight singing sensation with Paolo, the jerk of an Italian. And eventually, at the end, Lizzie and Gordo, who were lifelong best friends, shared a scene-stopping kiss, and that's it. We didn't hear anything for 15 years later. So all the cast is returning, and Duff even said that her and Gordo will be reprising the same roles, and Gordo will be an eventual love interest for her in New York. Honestly, I'm pretty tentative. I mean, I loved this show so much. I had every season on box disc, and I mean, Hilary Duff was my first concert. I loved her. I loved everything she did. I loved Lizzie McGuire, Cinderella Story, Raise Your Voice, Agent Cody Banks, everything. She was my idol. But if she says it's going to be good and she joined the cast and she signed back on, then, you know, it must be good. So I'm willing to watch. I'm willing to give it a shot. Maybe it'll be good. Hilary Duff always had a really good head on her shoulders, and I think that's why she was my idol so much growing up, from the time I was like 6, 7, 8, 9, and even 10 when the show got canceled. I always noted to myself, even at a young age, of how good of a head she had on her shoulders, left and right, through the Disney franchise. Lindsay Lohan, Vanessa Hudgens, even Raven-Symoné, you saw all of these Disney stars kind of spiral, and Hilary Duff never did that, and if she did, she kept it pretty personal and private. And I remember thinking, she was one of the good ones. She was a good role model. So if she signed on for this, you know, I believe her, and I'll watch it. I'll suspend my disbelief and watch it. I'm pretty excited for it. Okay, when we come back for our final segment, I will be telling you guys what I'm watching this week on Netflix. I'm watching World's Busiest Cities, Broken, and Glow Up. And then we'll also do some trailer talk. So I'll let you in on what I've been seeing in the theaters coming to 2020, which trailers you should check out and which movies you should watch for. We'll be talking a little bit about Finn Wolfhard and how he's literally dominating the movie scene. Stay tuned. We'll be right back with the GSMC Television Podcast.
Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? The GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast is a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts America Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today. Download the GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
So I was talking to my partner's uncle over the Christmas holiday, and he is into interior design. So he was telling me how a couple of years ago he visited Hong Kong, and he was almost kidnapped. And I listened to the story just amazed at everything that he'd been through. And I was scrolling through Netflix one day, and apparently the black market trade in Hong Kong is incredibly bumping. Like, they kidnap tourists that seem to appear young and harvest their organs for trade. It's super dark. And so when I was scrolling through Netflix the other day, I saw World's Busiest Cities, and I saw the trailer for Hong Kong, so I immediately clicked on it, and I was like, I need to know more. I need to know more about what's going on. I had no idea. I thought, no, the U.S. is the most corrupt city, and no, I was totally wrong. So I've been watching this show, The World's Busiest Cities, and basically there's 3 episodes. It's Hong Kong, Mexico City, and Moscow, Russia. Oh, there's 4. And Delhi, India. So it takes you on a kind of like city tour of whatever city is presented in the episode, and it takes you through the economy, what's booming in their economy, how their infrastructure is set up, the jobs, and the people behind the city that keep it running. And so I was watching Hong Kong, and although it is the #1 biggest business country and most economic savvy country, like most trade and business happens in Hong Kong. They're the leading, they lead economics in the world. The living conditions compared to the US are insane. I thought that rent was high here. And if you watch this documentary, most of their citizens are staying in pods, like 200-foot pods, because they build their city from the ground up, so there's no space. And if there is space, it costs money. Most people share housing with their extended family, so there's 8, 9, or 10 people living in the same house in one room, so they have to build up and utilize their space up instead of out, and so they stay in these pods. And it's insane the way their infrastructure and economy, though it has boomed, the gap between the poor and the rich has grown to just this crazy, you can't put it back together anymore. The gap is so wide. If you like learning about geography and different cities and just learning about how different systems work in different places around the world, I would definitely recommend this show. It gives you an inside look on how different it is to live somewhere else. I watched a little bit about Mexico City, and it seems like it's the same thing. People live so much differently in other countries than they do here. In the US, we're used to space, and we're used to having our own rooms, and families don't live together anymore. But in Mexico City, as well as in Hong Kong, families and extended families are staying in one house, and that's like 15 people in a house, 15 to 20 people in a house to save money, because these countries are so economically poor. Their infrastructure and their economic systems are just ruined, and we really take for granted the space and the luxury that we have in the U.S. I knew it with Mexico City, but I thought Hong Kong would be way different. I thought that Japan and Hong Kong, China, all of the Asian countries, I thought they were more, since they were more advanced, which they are, that they lived an ultra sleek and chic lifestyle, and it's just not true. I think we take advantage of what we have in the U.S. The next show I've been watching is called Broken, and this show's about all of the things that we waste here in America. Now, these are mostly America-central shows. And I've been on a makeup kick lately. Like, I've gotten super into high-end makeup. So I saw the trailer for this show, and their little snippet was about makeup and how so much of it is thrown out. And it also, how much of it is being produced, like how much of it is fake and counterfeit makeup. And this documentary was wild because I've been on this cosmetics kick. Like, I'm super into Kylie Cosmetics, and I like following Jeffree Star and all of the YouTubers and the indie brands that are popping up in the makeup world, like ColourPop makeup and Milk makeup. And so this documentary, it's called Broken. It goes over how all of these small companies can afford to produce this makeup and put it out so cheaply, and how the people who are profiting from it in the counterfeit world, how they make their makeup and how dangerous it is. When the Kylie Cosmetics line came out, there were reports of people getting their lips glued together because Kylie Cosmetics, they use a very high-end conditioner for the lip, and to try and get the consistency of the counterfeit makeup to match the consistency of the Kylie Cosmetics actual line, they had to replace the chemicals with something cheaper, and they replaced it with glue. And so many customers, their lips were burned and glued together, and it was just crazy watching how this makeup was made in factories in unsanitary conditions. So if you like makeup and shows like how it's made and just shows that kind of it's like another documentary style. I don't know why I've been on like a reality documentary style kick lately, but it's a pretty interesting show to check out, especially if you are into keeping up with all of the latest beauty trends and you kind of want to figure out what's going on behind the beautiful beauty world curtain and what's kind of the ugly stuff that's going on underneath. I definitely recommend that show. Finally, I've been watching Glow Up, and I haven't gotten super far into this show. I've watched maybe the first episode, but it's like your other reality shows. I watch a lot of reality shows on Netflix. I didn't know how much I watched until I sat down and made a list of all the shows I watch on Netflix, and they're mostly reality. But Glow Up is about 15 makeup artists that compete. So it's like your average run-of-the-mill competition show. But these people are doing makeup. So they do commercial shoots. They do runway shoots. They do shoots on location. And they give them all these different parameters. Like in a reality show, you'll be given different rules. And so these people, they battle it out to see who can create the best makeup look. And then at the end, one winner is chosen. And I like keeping up with the latest looks. I feel like it's fun. I've always had an interest for fashion and makeup and hair and stuff. So the show, although I haven't gotten far into it, looks fun. I always liked America's Next Top Model and stuff like that. So I like competition shows. All right, before we end, I want to talk a little bit about the trailers I've seen in the theater lately. So whenever I was going to see Little Women, I saw a trailer for Ghostbusters coming out in 2020. And I want to say, once again, with the unoriginal material, besides that, not, just throwing that out there. It's true. Finn Wolfhard, I've seen him in just about every movie lately. He started in Stranger Things, and then so that was a pretty big franchise, and then he also jumped right onto It, and that was a pretty big franchise. He did The Goldfinch. He just finished filming Ghostbusters 2020, and now he's doing The Turning. Oh, and Addams Family. He's in everything. He's been doing this for maybe 4 years, and he's in everything. Crazy. These kids are dominating the movie scene and the TV scene. He's bagged like 5 big movies and 2 huge TV shows. Alright guys, that's all I got for you today. I have enjoyed so much doing my first cast for GSMC. I just want to thank you guys for listening to the GSMC podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I would like that you also please remember to subscribe to the show, write a nice review. That really helps us. Also, if you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. I will talk to you guys next time. Thank you and have a good night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Television Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.